Hannibal Barca did not choose his destiny, it was sworn into him. His father, Hamilcar, Carthage's greatest general, had fought Rome in the First Punic War. He had lost, but he had not forgotten. Before the gods, the boy made a vow that he would never be a friend to Rome, that he would hate them for as long as he lived. Most children inherit a name. Hannibal inherited a war. From that day forward, his childhood was not games or stories. It was steel, strategy, and the heavy weight of his father's bitterness. In every lesson, every wound, every scar, he was being shaped into a weapon, not just against men, but against an empire. And Rome had no idea what was coming for them. But before Hannibal, there was Hamilcar, a general who fought Rome and lost. Rome stripped Carthage of its ships, its wealth, its dignity, but Hamilcar did not bend. He looked to the horizon and raised his son in the shadow of vengeance. Rome thought Carthage was broken, but Carthage had fathers like Hamilcar Barca, men who did not forget, men who would not forgive. In Iberia, Hamilcar built something new, an army of mercenaries, silver from the mines, loyalty bought in blood and gold. It was not Carthage's army. It was the Barca family's army. Hamilcar told his son, "Swear hatred for Rome for as long as you breathe." And Hannibal swore. He swore before the gods. When Hamilcar died in battle, Hannibal did not take over. Not yet. Hasdrubal the Fair takes command. Hannibal waits, watching, learning, waiting for his time to come. When Hannibal finally inherited command, he did not inherit a broken people. He inherited a weapon, an army forged from Carthage's ashes, paid by Spain's silver, bound by Hannibal's will. It was not enough to fight Rome, but it was enough to wound her pride, and Hannibal knew, if he could wound Rome's pride, he could wound Rome itself. By the time Hannibal commanded armies, he was no longer just Hamilcar's son. He was Carthage's blade, sharpened, unforgiving. He struck Rome not in Italy, but in Spain, a dagger to the Republic's lifeblood, its silver, its trade, its pride. The Romans demanded his submission. Instead, Hannibal gave them silence. And then, war. But to reach Rome, he would choose the impossible, not the sea, not the straight road, but the mountains, 40,000 men, thousands of horses, and even war elephants, dragged through frozen death. He lost half his army on the journey, but what survived was forged harder than steel. No foreign army had crossed these mountains before. Rome believed it could not be done, but Hannibal had made a vow as a boy, and vows demand blood. For the first time in centuries, Rome would feel fear. Rome's treaty said Carthage could not cross the river Ebro in Spain. But south of that river stood Saguntum, a city under Rome's protection, not Carthaginian, not Roman, caught somewhere in between. For Hannibal, Saguntum was more than a city. It was a test. Would he bow to Rome's shadow or break it? He chose to break it. The siege lasted months. Starvation gnawed. The defenders fought like cornered wolves, but Hannibal did not relent. The city falls. Roman envoys storm into Carthage's senate, faces red with fury. Rome demanded Hannibal's surrender. Carthage hesitated, but the Barcas had grown too powerful, too independent. And so, Carthage stalled. They refused to give Hannibal up. "Here we bring you peace and war. Take whichever you please." Carthage answered, "Give us war." And so the Second Punic War had begun, but Hannibal did not wait for Rome to come to him. He would bring war to their soil. Across mountains no army had dared to cross. To kill Rome, he would march into the impossible. Hannibal had a choice: sail across the sea, where Rome ruled, or march across the Alps, where no army had survived. To Rome, it looked impossible. To Hannibal, impossible was the point. He led nearly 40,000 men and wore elephants, his secret weapon, a living symbol of terror meant to shake Roman hearts before battle. But the Alps were no battlefield. They were a graveyard. Frostbite, hunger, local tribes ambushing from the cliffs, men starving, horses collapsing. Even the elephants, mighty as they were, began to stumble and die. And yet, he endured. Because Hannibal did not just march for conquest. He marched with a vow. That oath dragged him forward when reason said turn back. When his men cried for retreat. When the mountains themselves tried to kill him. He had done the impossible. Crossed the uncrossable. And with what remained of his army, he stood at the gates of Rome's world. Rome had no idea what was coming. Rome thought Hannibal was a ghost. He had no reinforcements from Carthage, no supply lines, an army of mercenaries, starving from the Alps. Rome believed crushing him would be easy. It was their first mistake. At the Trebia River, Hannibal lured the Romans into freezing waters, soaked, shivering, weighed down by their armor. They never saw his cavalry circle behind them. Tens of thousands fell. Rome called it bad luck. At Lake Trasimene, he led them into a valley, fog thick as death. Rome marched blind. It became the largest ambush in history. 15,000 Romans died in a single morning. The Senate gasped. Was this man even mortal? Then came Cannae, the day Rome met annihilation. Hannibal placed his weakest men in the center, and when Rome charged, he let them win. The Carthaginian lines curved, wrapped, closed. It wasn't a battle. It was butchery. 70,000 Romans killed in a single day. Rome had faced defeat before, but never extinction. For the first time in history, the Republic braced for collapse, because outside their walls stood Hannibal Barca, the man who swore eternal hatred of Rome. After Cannae, Rome lay defenseless, its armies shattered, its senate in panic. The road to the eternal city was open. And yet, Hannibal did not march on Rome. Why? Historians still argue. Some say his army was too exhausted, too far from supply. Others whisper of a deeper strategy, that he wanted Rome broken from within, not burned to ash. He waited for Italy's cities to revolt, for allies to rise against their Roman masters, for the Republic to tear itself apart. But Rome did not break. Instead, Rome adapted. They bled themselves dry to raise fresh armies. They refused negotiations, and they swore one truth above all. Rome does not die. For 15 years, Hannibal prowled Italy like a shadow, winning battles, but losing the war. Because while he ravaged their fields, Rome struck elsewhere, seizing Carthage's empire piece by piece. The hunter had become the trapped. And so, the man who could have ended Rome, who carved his name into terror itself, would soon find the war dragged back to his own homeland. The final clash was coming. And this time, Hannibal would not be the ambusher. For over a decade, Hannibal had haunted Italy, but now Rome had come for Carthage itself. Scipio Africanus, the rising Roman star, landed in Africa, and Carthage, desperate, summoned its greatest son home. Before the battle, the two men met. Hannibal, the seasoned predator, Scipio, the young wolf who had studied his every move. Some say Hannibal warned him. Rome's hunger would never end, but Scipio offered no peace, only war. Hannibal's last gamble, war elephants, veterans of Cannae, mercenaries gathered from Carthage's last allies. But Rome had learned. Trumpets blared, soldiers parted ranks, and the elephants thundered harmlessly through. The beast that once shattered Rome's armies now stumbled into silence. The clash was brutal, but Rome had evolved. They fought not just with strength, but with Hannibal's own tactics turned against him. At Zama, the man who once stood at Rome's gates was finally broken. Carthage's power was shattered. Hannibal lived, but as a fugitive, Rome would never forgive him. The lion of Carthage had been caged. After Zama, Hannibal did not vanish. He wandered, advising foreign kings, whispering strategies to any who might resist Rome. But everywhere, Rome's shadow followed. Envoys demanded his surrender. No place was safe. At last, in Bithynia, the net closed. Roman agents demanded his capture, the great enemy of Rome, cornered at last. But Hannibal had one final weapon. He carried poison, always, for he had sworn Rome would never parade him in chains, and so, with his last breath, he denied them their triumph. Hannibal Barca, the scourge of Rome, the boy who swore vengeance, chose his own ending. Rome won the war, but Hannibal won the last move. Hannibal died more than a century before Julius Caesar was even born. But his ghost never left Rome. For generations, Roman mothers whispered his name to frighten their children into obedience. Go to bed, or Hannibal will come. And Roman generals studied his genius, his ambush at Cannae, his daring march across the Alps. Every senator, every soldier knew Rome had nearly fallen once. To men like Caesar, Hannibal was not just a memory. He was a lesson that even the mightiest empire can be brought to its knees by one man with vision and vengeance.